So many people have noted that one of the things that seems to have won the election for President-elect Trump is that he didn't just appear on mainstream TV, or some people now refer to it as legacy media, but he went on podcasts. And he understood, and some were saying it was his son, Barron Trump, who really understood this, the power, the impact, the reach of podcasts, going on Joe Rogan's podcast and others, even like gamers' podcasts. They're huge. In some ways, JTV is a bit of a podcast. It's on the new media online, YouTube, etc. And now people who are opponents to him, people on the left answer to these sort of podcasts that have more sympathies with conservative people is to have speakers that promote their sort of left, or some ways far left and progressive vision. And there's an interesting article in the Jewish Insider which talks about the left's answer to Joe Rogan, who is a guy called Hasan Piker, who you'll see in this image over here. This is Hasan Piker. And they're saying, the irony is they're saying this is the left's answer to Joe Rogan. Interestingly enough, Joe Rogan himself was a progressive. He supported Bernie Sanders. I think he supported Obama. I'm not sure, but he was not considered a conservative. And in some ways, it's a bit of a... it shows in some ways how many people the left has alienated by making this point. But regardless, they're saying that this is the left's answer to these conservative podcasters, Piker. But to not much surprise, he has a well-documented record of anti-Semitic hate. And I want to read to you what has been written by Gabby Deutsch in the Jewish Insider. She says that as Democrats are recovering from their bruising defeat last month, one voice looking to help liberals make sense of their loss to President-elect Donald Trump is Hasan Piker, a left-wing streamer with 2.8 million followers on Twitch, a video game streaming platform. More than 7.5 million people tuned into his election night livestream, more than the number of viewers for either MSNBC or CNN that night. It just shows you the power of these podcasts now. She says, quote, Piker told CNN last week that I don't think that the Democratic Party can podcast itself out of this issue, responding to criticism that Vice President Kamala Harris hurt her chances by declining to appear with the popular podcast host Joe Rogan. Quote, I think they need to change their policies. Some on the left and in the media have identified Piker as an internet-savvy guru with a loyal left-wing following, as offering something of a solution for the Democratic Party. But despite his cachet among a Gen Z constituency that lives online, Piker comes with his own hate-filled baggage. Known as Hasan Pabi on Twitch, Piker has a history of invoking anti-Semitic tropes when he discusses Israel and the Jewish community. He is a staunch opponent of Israel's right to exist. Piker offered justifications for Hamas' October 7th attacks just one day later. Just one day later, imagine that. He's also mocked people concerned about rising anti-Semitism worldwide. Last month, after mobs motivated by calls for a Jew hunt attacked Israeli soccer fans in Amsterdam, Piker claimed that people who called the incident anti-Semitic were wrong, and that by merely suggesting the incident was anti-Semitic, they were the ones responsible for more anti-Semitism. CNN correspondent Donnie O'Sullivan briefly acknowledged those criticisms, but didn't press Piker on the matter. Quote, the way you talk about Israel is viewed by some as anti-Semitic. Are you anti-Semitic? O'Sullivan asked. Piker answered with a straightforward, of course not. The real problem here, he responded, is that I'm an anti-Zionist. Yes, the classic, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm just anti-Zionist. It's a distinction he has leaned on often in response to criticism that he is, in fact, anti-Semitic. This is why we have to make it clear that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. You're saying the Jews don't have the right to live in their own land. They don't have a right to a home. Unlike all other peoples on planet Earth, they can't have a right to a home of their own, despite being more persecuted than any other people on the planet, despite having a stronger connection with that plot of land than any other people does with any other land in the history of nations and lands. I'm sorry, but it is so blatantly a form of anti-Jewish prejudice, being anti-Zionist, that it's just laughable, these distinctions. Not to mention, of course, the fact that Judaism is permeated on every single page with a connection to the land of Israel. Just open a Bible. When people say to me, I don't support Zionism, but I support Judaism, they're very different things. They're so different. Have you read the Bible? Just open the Bible. It's the story of the Jewish people going to their land of Israel. That's the story of the Bible, going to their promised land. Anyway, the article continues. CNN is not the only mainstream outlet where Piker has received a platform lately. NBC News profiled him in September after he attended the Democratic National Convention as an influencer. Top New York Times political reporter Astied Herndon appeared on his stream as a guest the same day Piker devoted a segment to undermining allegations of anti-Semitism in Amsterdam, which is just outrageous because they were hunting down Jews in the Anne Frank city. Spokespeople at CNN and NBC did not respond to requests for comment about the decision to feature Piker, and the New York Times didn't respond to an inquiry about Herndon's appearance. Quote, "It is bewildering that mainstream media outlets continue to platform Hasan Piker, an influencer whose toxic screeds against Zionism and the Jewish state normalize anti-Semitism, reinforce bigotry, and launder terror," Anti-Defamation League CEO Jonathan Greenblatt told Jewish Insider this week. Representative Richie Torres told JI in October that, quote, "Nobody has been a greater amplifier of anti-Semitism than Piker." In November, Piker was a guest host on the popular liberal podcast Pod Save America. The host knew that bringing him on would invite controversy. Quote, "We're going to platform people you don't like, and that's okay," host John Lovett wrote on X, in response to a post decrying Piker's guest appearance on the podcast. "We're going to push back or just listen sometimes, and that's okay, but criticism's welcome." On the show, Lovett acknowledged the heated reaction to Piker. Quote, "One of the reasons people will be mad that you're on the show is because you're like a proud anti-Zionist," said Lovett, who in turn identified himself as a Zionist. Lovett described his own anger at Israel's handling of the war in Gaza, but it reiterated his support for a two-state solution. Piker disagreed with that position while describing Israel's war as a genocide. Lovett did not push back. Lovett did not respond to a request for comment from JI. I've got to say, by the way, I have very little time for people that say, well, I support Israel and two-state solution, but I don't like how they're acting in Gaza. I mean, what else do you want them to do, honestly? What else do you want them to do? They're having more surgical precision in getting rid of Hamas than any army has shown in the history of modern urban warfare. When we fought ISIS, when the Western world fought ISIS in the Battle of Mosul, the combatant to non-combatant ratio was about 1 to 12. Here it's 1 to 2 in Gaza. And yet Israel's committing a genocide. It's ridiculous. And don't forget, many non-combatants who are killed are in fact deeply complicit. Whether they're just underage but they're fighting for Hamas, i.e. they're 17 years old. Whether there's someone housing munitions, holding hostages, teaching kids to become martyrs. And then he says, I support two-state solution. I'm sorry, two-state solution. It's been tried for 100 years, and all it does is feed into an anti-Israel narrative, a false nationalism that is simply based on killing the Jews rather than a genuine desire for their own nation state. The article continues, one day after October 7th, Piker, who broadcast for up to 10 hours a day, occasionally with guests but often alone, addressed the Hamas attacks that killed 1,200 people and resulted in more than 200 hostages taken back to Gaza. Quote, I'm not going to be one of the people that says like, oh, they're settlers, they deserve the violence, they deserve getting shot on the street. No, nobody deserves that, Piker said of the Israeli victims, before speaking at length about what he described as the inevitability of Hamas's October 7th attack, blaming it on Israel's treatment of Palestinians in Gaza. Do you think this happened out of nowhere, he said? Do you think this happened out of thin air? Are you stupid? Do you think the Israeli state was just like peacefully coexisting and these guys come in with gliders out of nowhere, he said angrily? You cannot push people into a corner their whole lives and not expect them to fight back at a certain point. I'm so sorry, Mr. Piker, but I've never heard so much garbage in my life. Everything that you lament about them being pushed into a corner is self-inflicted by the Palestinian people and their leadership. It's not Israel's doing. I don't know how far back you want to go. We can go all the way back if you want to go, but let's just do recently. Israel leaves Gaza in 2005, says, okay, you want to have your own state? Fine. Try it in Gaza. Go ahead. Make a success of it. Take our greenhouses, our infrastructure, our economy, our beachfront. We're all going to leave. Jews, Israelis, gone. And then people say, I'm sure Piker would say, yeah, but you blockaded them and you made it like a prison. I'm sorry. Israel didn't blockade it. For 2 years. There was no blockade. which is actually just a censoring for weapons. And what do? The people voted in Hamas. They fire rockets across, build tunnels underneath, teach their kids to become martyrs, destroy the greenhouses, make it a terror society. And then after 2 years, Israel says, right, you've had all the funds in the world from the international community to make a success of it, and you've chosen terror, you've chosen trying to destroy us. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to censor this for weapons, what comes in and out. We're going to allow things to come in and out, food, medicine, whatever. We're going to censor for weapons so you don't try and kill us. That's not a prison. That's sanity. And to be honest, the quality of life, the living standards in Gaza from 2007 to 2024 were actually still better than many other places in the Middle East. To dare compare it to a prison camp or a concentration camp is a disgrace. And there didn't need to even be this censoring for weapons and all these things had they chosen peace and coexistence. The same is true of the displacement they lament in 48, which they'll say is the root of the conflict. Had they just said, okay, we'll live alongside the Jews who purchased land and live here legally, not through usurping us, but they chose to go to war against the Jews rather than having two states as the UN proposed, despite that the only sovereign state that had ever existed in that land was a Jewish one. And they lost. And they were displaced because Arab leadership primarily told them to leave, go out, and then they can come back once they've killed the Jews. And now they complain and whine. It's all self-inflicted. All this suffering is self-inflicted by the Palestinians. The leadership, the Arabs really, as they should be called, because the Palestinian identity is a cynical identity simply designed to try and undermine Israel. They really consider themselves Arabs and part of the Arab world who can't bear to see the Jewish people re-establish sovereignty in their land because it threatens their narrative of Islamic domination over that region and the wider world. So I'm not falling for any of this. And to say that it's therefore inevitable what happened with October 7th, let me be clear. Let me be absolutely clear. Let's even just say that you want to that we accept that Gaza was, let's say, like a concentration camp, which it absolutely wasn't. But let's just say, for argument's sake, let me tell you, Mr. Piker, if my grandparents' generation, who actually escaped real concentration camps from Nazi Europe, and if they went out after they were liberated, or if they broke out and started murdering, beheading, burning, raping, mutilating, kidnapping random German men, women, and children, I assure you the Jewish people would not en masse support that or say, what do you expect? And say, yeah, well, this is resistance. So I'm not accepting any of this garbage from Mr. Piker, and neither should anyone. It's anti-Semitic bile. The article continues by saying that Piker has argued there's no such thing as liberal Zionism and that support for Israel is incompatible with progressive politics, even as he acknowledged that the majority of Jews feel a connection to Israel. Such nonsense. Such nonsense. So, quote, so many Jews have connection to Israel. That's the line I hear a lot from liberal Zionists. Piker said in a June 24 stream, no matter how progressive you are, if you still have this hang-up born out of so much social conditioning from birth, ultimately you're engaging in some way, shape or form in the defense of an otherwise ethno-nationalist supremacist ideology. Oh, I see. So having the Jews leave the land or having a Palestinian state, which inevitably would lead to the Jews being ethnically cleansed, that's not an ethno agenda. And quite frankly, this idea of an ethno-nationalist state, it's saying the Jewish people are have an ancient indigenous and legal connection to this plot of land. Yes, the Jewish people belong in the land of Judea. And when you say it's ethnic, anyone can become Jewish. It's not ethnic in that sense, but it is a nation. The Jewish people are a nation who come from a certain plot of land, and there's nothing wrong in saying that. That's just the truth. Piker has routinely belittled Jews' fears of anti-Semitism and argued that accusations of anti-Semitism are employed in order to distract from Israel's actions in Gaza. Oh no, to the contrary. Him saying that you're just smearing me, is a way to try and allow him to continue his anti-Semitic hate. In October, during a CNN town hall with Harris, Piker hosted a stream responding to Harris's comments. When a voter asked Harris how she will address rising anti-Semitism on US campuses, Piker derided the question and mocked Harris's response. Quote, will every single college campus Liberals signed a petition to say they will never disparage the beautiful state of Israel or not. If your answer is no, I don't know. I can't vote for you, he said sarcastically. How will Kamala Harris combat anti-Semitism on college campuses? That's my single issue, Piker continued. There are still students out there that learn in classrooms that genocide is bad, for example. I don't think that that's appropriate. I think that science genocide is good. Like, for example, if the victims of the genocide are barbaric animal monsters who have an antiquated ancient gene of anti-Semitism in their hearts. If you don't teach it like that, then people are going to learn the wrong lessons. Oh, it's so boring. It's so boring what Piker says. Such lies. We have to call it out. We really have to. When Piker discussed the violence against Israelis in Amsterdam, he attributed it to soccer's hooligan culture. Unbelievable. At the same time, he suggested Israelis who were beaten up and stalked in the streets deserved it because some fans of Maccabi Tel Aviv had taunted Arabs in the city with Islamophobic slurs earlier in the day. He called the Israeli fans Judeo-Nazi ultra-fans. It's so gross and so shameless the way that people who want to defend Israel's utterly unconscionable immoral actions will just so cynically, consistently say that it's anti-Semitic, Piker said. Well, we'll say it because it is. Because you never speak this way about any other country, and you are spreading lies and hate in order to undermine the Jewish people's rightful homeland and ability to live in peace and security. Quote, Piker said, when Israel is going on defense mode after sicking their football hooligans on foreign soil and then crying foul after they got their arse beat to be like, this is an anti-Semitic pogrom, you're literally just making people more anti-Semitic. Well, I'm sure we're making him more anti-Semitic, but that's because it's not because of anything we've done, but because he doesn't like to see Jewish people push back. Anti-Semites love dead Jews. 2 weeks later, he hosted Tar Nehisi Coates, the National Book Award-winning author, to talk about how he, quote, saw the truth about Palestine. In May, Piker hosted Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Goodness me, well, both of those things don't really surprise me much. Well, there we go. I will be absolutely sure to call out the lies of Piker when I see it, if he's going to continue to gain more and more prominence. And it's important that we do. If you know people that watch him, tell them to watch this video and watch the pushback that we're getting because that I'm giving to these comments, because it's so important to tell the truth. Speaking of telling the truth, we're going to be doing a fundraiser for JTV. It's happening in just a few days. Please click on the link in the video description to donate to our fundraiser campaign. You can do that right now. We're going to use the funds to scale our growth, to have more content, more presenters, animated content, documentaries, so we can grow at a much faster rate and compete with the anti-Israel online media equivalents like Piker. And even though we're having a really good impact now, there's a lot more we can do. So please click on the link in the video description to donate and partner with us in spreading the truth to a world that desperately needs it.